Hello all of you. Now let's start from where we left yesterday, and that is the definitions. So let's see the new one, section 2 clause 50, fixed establishment. Now this definition of fixed establishment will come into play in the chapter of place of supply. So when we have to determine the place of supply, then this definition of fixed establishment will be used. So what it means, let's see. How to use it, that we'll see in the chapter of place of supply. Okay. So fixed establishment means a place other than the registered place of business. Registered place means the original registered place. Like Farooqa Classes, Nagpur is a registered place of business. But I have also got a branch in Pune. So that branch in Pune will be called as fixed establishment, though it is not registered because it is in the same state, so I don't have to register it. But since it is a fixed place from where I do my business, it will be called as a fixed establishment. So fixed establishment is, you can say, the second wife. Your first wife is the registered premise and your second wife is the fixed establishment. Where you can go and stay is your home because she is your wife, so it's a home, but it is not registered. Now see, this example just came to my mind on the spot. I had not thought of it earlier, but it suits the purpose. So let's see. Fixed establishment means a place other than the registered place which is characterized by a sufficient degree of permanence. Sufficient degree of permanence. So it is not girlfriend. It's not girlfriend. It is wife, second wife. And suitable structure to in terms of human and technical resources, means you should have employees there, right? Permanent employees who are working there full time. And technical resources, like you can have assets there, computers and all, to supply service or to receive and use services for its own needs. So from there you can either supply or you receive, either case, supply or receive. And one more place we'll use this definition later on, and that will be input service distributor, ISD. Input service distribution. Right? So we'll use it. But right now you just understand that registered place is your primary place of business. Now registered place is also a fixed place, but that is a primary place, so we go and register it under the GST laws. Okay, so that becomes my registered premises. Fixed establishment is other than registered premise, but which has a permanence of business. We have a permanent setup there, we do business from there on a long-term basis. Okay. And the explanation also says that the following three elements are critical to determine whether a place is a fixed place or not. Number one, having sufficient degree of permanence. Sufficient degree of permanence. Number two, having a structure of human and technical resources. That is, you should have assets there as well as the manpower, the human resource. And it is other than the registered premise. Other than the registered premise, registered place of business. And the following aspects need to be noted. A fixed establishment refers to a place of business which is not registered. The person who undertakes supply of service or so and so should receive and use services for own needs at such place. Supply or receive or own needs. Not every temporary or interim location of a project site or transit warehouse will become a fixed establishment of the taxable person. Anything which is temporary in nature or interim in nature, like I want to do a class in Assam, so I go there, take a class on rent, set up a small office for 1 week and then shut it down. So I cannot say that that is a fixed place because it's a temporary thing. It is for the time being. So any office that you set up for the time being, for a few days, temporary in nature, will not be called as fixed establishment. Okay. So anything which is temporary or interim for the time being will not be an establishment, including a project site. Like you can have a project site at some place, but which is for temporary, some time, few days, then it will not be a fixed place. But if it is a long-term thing, it is going to stay there for 2 years and 3 years and 4 years, then yes, it will become a fixed establishment. And temporary presence of staff in a place by way of short visit to a place or so does not make the establishment fixed establishment. Say for example, even if I have a place full time, but my staff is not there. Staff goes for 1 week and then come back. And again after a few months it goes for 1 week and then again come back. Then that will not be a fixed establishment. Like CAs. CAs have audits across India. So they have to send their staff. So I'm sending my few people to RBI and few people to Infosys and few people to Tatas and few people to Birlas. I've got all these audits, so of course I have to send my articles there. So they go there, they sit there, they audit and come back. So sometimes they spend 1 month, somewhere they spend 6 weeks and so on and so forth. So will those places become my fixed places of business? No, not at all. Example is also given that a service provider is in the business of renting of immovable property. Service has to be registered office at Bangalore. Okay, so he has the office in Bangalore. This is the registered office. And the property for rent along with an office is located in Chennai. So there is another office located in Chennai. In this case, the registered office will be principal place of business, and the property in Chennai along with the offices in Chennai will be regarded as fixed place of service provider. So Bangalore is his registered office and Chennai office will be called as fixed establishment. The next definition of fund, we'll use this in the chapter of refund. If you have paid anything excess to the government and then you have to claim refund, the refund is given to you. And if you are not traceable, means the person to whom the refund is to be given is not traceable, he is not available, he is not found, then the amount is deposited in a consumer welfare fund. So that is called as fund. It means consumer welfare fund. So established under section 57. This section 57 is of refund chapter, which we'll study much later. Then next is definition of goods. This is similar to what you have studied in Sales of Goods Act in your CPT, right? So it's on the similar lines. Yeah. So it is on similar lines. Let's see. Goods means every kind of movable property. Movable. So immovable will not be called as goods. Land, building will not be called as goods. Other than money and securities. So money and securities are excluded from the terminology of goods. They are not goods. So if you have any money with you, the notes, the coins, that will not be goods. Or if you have securities, that is the bonds, the debentures, the shares, they will also not be called as goods. But includes actionable claims, that is amount receivables, growing crops, grass, and things attached to or forming part of land which are agreed to be severed before supply or under contract of supply. So if anything is attached to the land which is not sold along with the land but which is to be severed, means the connection will be broken and then it will be supplied, then yes, that will be called as goods. Like a machinery, a big machine or a plant is set up on the land. Now I am selling that plant, but that plant is huge, so we have agreed to sever the connection, means though it is attached to the land but it will be removed and supplied. It will be removed and supplied. So removal means severance. The connection of the plant will be broken from the land under contract of sale. So then it will be called as supply, right? Of no use, so even if you forget, that's good. Then India. Now this definition we have already studied in the first chapter. What is India? The landmass of India and the sea water up to 200 nautical miles and the land beneath the sea, that is subsoil, up to 12 nautical miles, and then the air up to 12 nautical miles. Remember? Yes, so that is what is given here. India includes the territory of India, that is the landmass of India, as referred to in Article 1 of the Constitution. Then its territorial waters, that is up to 12 nautical miles, seabed and subsoil underlying such waters, then continental shelf exclusive economic zone or the maritime zone, this goes up to 200 nautical miles, Continental Shelf Exclusive Economic Zone Act, and the airspace above its territory and territorial waters. Great. So no need to explain again because we had already studied this in detail earlier on. Then next is definition of integrated tax. Integrated tax means the IGST, which is levied upon interstate supplies. Very simple to remember. Then input. Input means any goods other than capital goods used or intended to be used by the supplier in the course or furtherance of business. Means basically the raw materials are called as inputs. Anything which is not capital goods and which is used for the purpose of making your outward supply is called as inputs. Then input service. Input service means the same thing. The services that I use in the course of my business. Services that I use, like audit. Somebody is doing my audit, so that is service used. Somebody is supplying me loan, so that is a service taken. Somebody is supplying me courier service, so that is a service taken. So I use so many services of different kinds of people in order to give my output service, that is coaching class. So all these services that I use, including the telephone bill and this and that, they will be called as input services. Very simple definition. Means any service used or intended to be used by the supplier in the course or furtherance of business. Then comes an interesting definition, input service distributor. You will not understand at this point of time, but we'll see this in detail. There's a whole chapter on this, input service distribution, a whole section I mean to say, in ITC. So we'll study this concept in ITC, input tax credit chapter. So leave it right now because you will not understand. Then comes input tax. Input tax is also used in ITC for giving you the credit, input tax credit. So since input tax in relation to a registered person means the central tax, this can be central tax, state tax, union territory tax or integrated tax, charged on any supply of goods or service or both made to him. Made to him, yani for us it is a purchase. We have purchased and on that purchases we have paid these taxes. So they will be called as input tax. And includes integrated goods and service tax charge on import of goods. Import, what happens is that when you import the goods into India, you pay the basic custom duty. Apart from basic custom duty, you have to also pay the integrated tax. Remember in customs, or if you have not studied customs, we'll study it later on. So in customs, there is customs duty plus integrated tax, which is equivalent to the integrated tax levied on goods manufactured in India. So that integrated tax will also be called as input tax. Means you are entitled to take the input tax credit of the same. You can avail the credit. But here let me explain one point, that you cannot avail credit of basic customs duty. So like for example, you have imported certain goods, the raw materials for you, which you are going to use in your factory. Now on these imported goods, there is basic customs duty, of say 1000. Then there is education, cess, etc. of customs. Other types of customs duty may be 200. And there is integrated tax of say another 700. So which of these three will be called as input tax? only the integrated tax. Only this integrated tax will be called as input tax, means you are entitled to take credit only of 700. So this manufacturer who has imported these goods can avail SENVAT credit, or I mean to say ITC input tax credit, only in respect of 700 and not for these two. So 1000 and 200, that is 1200, no ITC, because it is not called as input tax, right? Very good. Then the tax payable under provisions of subsection 3 and 4 of section 9, that is reverse charge. Then any tax payable under provisions of subsection 3 and 4 of section 5 of integrated tax, that is also reverse charge in IGST. This is reverse charge in central tax, this is reverse charge in IGST. Then tax payable under the provisions of subsection 3 and 4 of section 9 of the respective state goods and service tax act, this is reverse charge in state laws. And the tax payable under provisions of subsection 3 and 4 of section 7 of the Union Territory Goods and Services Tax Act. This is reverse charge of Union Territory. So reverse charge applies for each of the acts, but does not include the tax paid under composition levy. Very important point. Composition levy, if the person has taken the advantage or the benefit of composition levy, then the tax which is paid there under composition levy is not called as input tax. So let me explain in brief how this happens in composition levy. Like this is a person, a dealer, who opts for composition levy. So when he buys his inputs, right, and receives them in the factory, and suppose the tax paid, the GST paid on these inputs is say 1700, the person, the dealer, does not get the credit. He does not get the credit in composition levy, so no ITC. Now his output he sells. On this output he will not charge the normal GST, but he will charge composition tax, which I have told you earlier is a very small percentage of the normal tax. Say the normal tax is 18% or 24%, the composition levy will be hardly 0.5 to 1%. So on the output he pays composition tax at a concessional rate of, say for example, 1% of the sales, the total value, right? Now this tax that he has paid, and suppose he is supplying his goods to another manufacturer, will that other manufacturer get credit of this tax? Can he take ITC of this tax which is paid here? Answer is no. No. So this output can become input for another person, right? It can become input for another person, and if so becomes, then this other person will want to take credit of this. Will he get the credit? No, because this composition tax is not considered as input tax. So if it is not an input tax, there is no question of allowing credit. Understood? Now we'll study this in much detail later on. Right now we are just in the definition section, but to explain you the brief idea, to give you a brief idea of how composition levy happens. So this person who opts for composition levy has to pay a very nominal tax, but this tax which he has paid on his output will not be allowed as input tax credit. So therefore this definition says that this is not an input tax. If it is not an input tax, no credit. Then intrastate supply of goods means as defined under section 8 of IGST Act. Intrastate supply of services as defined again in section 8. So these two we'll study in IGST. intra, inter, all these definitions are given in IGST. Then invoice or tax invoice, no use. Inward supply, no use. Inward supply means what we are receiving is called as inward supply. Then comes job work. Job work is to be studied. Job work means any treatment or process undertaken by a person on goods belonging to another registered person. On goods belonging to another registered person. And the expression job worker shall be construed accordingly. Means understood accordingly. So job work is defined, and one who does it will be called as a job worker. Simple. So what do you understand by this definition? It's a very simple thing. It means that there is a person here and there is a person here. This person owns the material or goods, we can say, and he sends these to the other person. This other person does not own it, so he is not transferring the material to this person. Owner remains the first person. The second person only performs a process or a treatment on the goods of the first person, and after this is done, the goods are returned to the first person. So what the other person is doing, he is giving a service to the first person in respect of his goods. So this person is called as a job worker. He is called as a job worker, and the first person is called as the principal. So he is the principal and he is the job worker. The one who performs a process or a treatment on the goods which are supplied by the other person. And after the job is done, he is returning it back. Now he may return it back or he may sell it off on the instructions of the first person. That is up to them, up to their internal contract. This also we'll study in detail later on in the chapter of job worker. There's a great discussion to be done. And below the definition some explanation is given, so you can go through that also. Just see, the expression job work refers to treatment or process which is undertaken by one person who may or may not be registered. The job worker need not be registered. He may be or he may not be. To another registered person means the owner of goods has to be a registered person. Okay. While treatment and processing are commonly understood as services, there is no implication that job work is purely service, or that goods would not be used for such treatment or processing. Means it is not necessary that goods would not be used. It can be used. Like I am sending some goods to you for repairs. Now during the repair process you can use some goods to do the repairs, to carry out the repairs, right? So it is not necessary that goods should not be involved at all. It may be involved. It may be involved. However, Schedule 2 of the CGST Act, which we will study later on, which specifies activities to be treated as supply of goods or services, inter alia provides that any treatment or process which is applied to another person's goods is a supply of service. So when the question comes that job work is goods or service, Schedule 2 says that it will be called as service. Now what is given there, I'll explain you in detail when we'll go to Schedule 2. And this Schedule 2 will study in the chapter of supply, section 7. So then you will understand in much detail. And the following aspects need to be noted, or rather one more line is there, that such a deeming fiction is in respect to job work is given effect to based on the primary objective of any job work, which is to provide a service. So once the primary objective is service, it will always be called a service. Job work is always called a service in GST, even though some goods may be involved. Supply of goods may be involved. Then the explanation is also given that the expression job work refers to treatment or process which is undertaken by one person who may or may not be registered. So job worker may not be registered because only the word person is given there and not registered person. To another registered person. So the person to whom the service is given should be a registered person. And while treatment or processing are commonly understood as services, there is no implication that job work is purely service, or that goods would not be used for such treatment or processing. However, Schedule 2, now this is interesting, this we are going to study. Schedule 2 of the CGST Act, this we'll study in section 7, that is the definition of supply, which specifies activities to be treated as supply of goods or supply of services. Inter alia provides that any treatment or process which is applied to another person's goods is a supply of service. So this is an interesting part which we will discuss in detail in section 7 later on. But right now I can tell you this much, that though job work can include goods also, it can include some goods, like you have supplied the main goods to me and then I'm using some subsidiary goods in order to give my service. So from my side I'm using some goods as well as my service, the treatment. So it can be a combination of both, but Schedule 2 specifically mentions that job work will always be called as a service, even though some goods may be involved. Such a deeming fiction in respect of job work is given effect to, based on the primary objective of the job work, which is to provide a service. So primary objective is service, and hence this deeming fiction is incorporated. Then following aspects need to be noted. The law makes no insistence that job worker must be a registered person. First point means job worker may be registered, may be unregistered. So there is no need for him to be registered person. Secondly, the law requires that the treatment or process undertaken by the job work must be on goods belonging to another registered person. So they have given two words, another registered person. From the usage of the term another before registered person, it is clear that the law intends to segregate the units being different persons or different registrations. So we are talking here about the distinct persons. Two registrations of the same person, Farooq Haq having different offices in different states. So I'll have different registrations. So one office can give this service to another office which has a separate registration. And since they are called as distinct, they will be called as another. So if Farooq Haq, one office gives service to Farooq Haq classes another office for some goods, treatment service, it can come here as job work service. So the reference to the principle is made by using another registered person and not another person. So what we are talking about, another registered person. So if this same person, Farooq Haq classes, has got two registrations, then they will be called as two different registered persons. So one of them can give a job work service to the other one. So it is not necessary that I should give to somebody else only. I can give to myself also, provided I have got two registrations. So therefore it is given that it may be safely understood that if one unit of a company supplies goods for processing to another unit of the same company having a different registration from that of the supplying unit, the unit undertaking the processing activity can be treated as a job worker. So those are simple points. Now we'll see a whole chapter on job work later on. Okay, so we'll be seeing not the whole chapter but a topic. A topic will come at the last in the second module of GST, where we'll study about the whole process of job work, how the goods are sent, how they are processed, what are the documents to be kept, and so on and so forth. The next definition is local authority. No need to study. Local authority means a panchayat or a municipality. forget it. Then a municipal committee, a Jilla Parishad, district board, and so on and so forth. Then cantonment boards, where the army is situated, they have their cantonment boards, army, navy, air force. Then regional council or a district council or a development board or a regional council. Will you remember all these points? Of course not. So no need to study. Then comes two very important definitions. Section 270 and then 271. Mark them as important. This is very important because when we'll go to the chapter of place of supply, POS in short, place of supply, at the time we'll need to find out the location of the recipient in certain situations. Where is the recipient situated? So for that, this definition will come into play. Okay, so let's see. Location of recipient of service. Where is the recipient located? So let's see. 4 points are there. A, where a supply is received. So we are talking about recipient, right? First we are talking about the recipient. So where the supply is received at a place of business, underline place of business, for which the registration has been obtained. So if you are like Farooqa Classes is the recipient of service, somebody provides service to me, maybe my auditor provides service to me, so I have a registered premise. So then the location of such place of business, that is the registered place of business, in short REG, just write REG. So if I am receiving the service at my registered place of business, then that is my location. Simple. Secondly, where a supply is received at a place other than the place of business for which registration has been obtained. So my registration is for my place in Nagpur. Okay, so my Nagpur office is registered, and I also have a Pune office, but Pune office is not registered separately. It is just mentioned as additional place of business. Then what? So let's say the location of such fixed establishment, but it is a fixed establishment. Fixed establishment means there is permanent staff there, there is a property taken on rent for a long term basis, there is a staff, they are employed with me, there is a permanency of operations. So when you have permanency of operations, it is called as a fixed place of business. So then that fixed place will be considered as the location of recipient. So even though my registered premise is in Nagpur and my other fixed establishment is in Pune, if I receive a service in Pune office, for Pune office, then that would be considered, Pune will be considered as location of recipient. Okay, so 2 points. Then third, where the supply is received at more than one establishment. At more than one establishment. So if you have got more than one establishment and there is some service which is received at all the places, means it's a common service. It is a common service which is received and utilized at both the places. Then what? Whether the place of business or fixed establishment. Place of business means the registered place, or the other one, the fixed establishment. The location of establishment most directly concerned with the receipt of supply. Most directly concerned. So if one is the head office and one is branch, and say for example we have received audit service, audit is done for both the main head office as well as the branch. Both of them receive this service. But which is the main place where the predominant service has been received? Most directly concerned, the head office. So then the head office will be considered as the place of recipient, the location of recipient. But say for example there is another service which is primarily received at the branch level, though some benefit has also passed on to head office, but primarily majority of the service was used at the branch and some minor part of it was used by the head office, then the location will become the branch. So you have to see most directly concerned means the benefits. Whatever service you have received, who has got how much benefits, or the use, where was that input service used, that is to be seen. Okay. And in the absence of such a place, so an absence of such a place means you guys, you are the recipients of so many services, but do you have any registered place? No. Do you have any fixed establishment of business? No. Then what? The location of usual place of residence of the recipient. So then we'll see the residence. So in your case, if you are the recipient of service, your place or your location would be your residence. Simple. So you can remember all these 4 points, very simple. If the service is received at the registered premises, then registered premise. If you have other fixed establishment and the service is received there, then that fixed establishment. If the service is received at both the places, the registered and the fixed establishments and so on and so forth, 2 or more places, then where the service was most directly concerned. Most directly concerned. And if you don't have any place of business or any fixed establishment, then residence. Simple. Okay. Excellent. Then coming to the next one, 271, that is location of supplier of service. Now the question is that where the supplier is located. So again 4 points, and mark this also as important. Okay. Now see, it is exactly the reverse. Where a supply is made from a place of business for which registration has been obtained, location of such place of business means the registered place. Secondly, where supply is made from a place other than the place of business for which registration has been obtained, that is a fixed establishment elsewhere, the location of such fixed establishment, FA. It is exactly reverse of the recipient. Then where the supply is made from more than one establishments. So if the supply is going from here also and from here also, like you have ordered 5,000 kilograms of goods, so 4,000 I am supplying from one branch and 1,000 from another branch. Then what? The location of establishment most directly concerned with the provision of supply. But example I took of goods, kilograms, you remove kilograms, you consider it as a service. So if I am providing service, majority of the service, like for example audit. So my main head office is in Nagpur and I've got one branch office also in Pune. My audit firm's branch office in Pune. And we have got a work in Bombay, in Mumbai. We have to go and audit somebody's office there. So majority of the staff came from Nagpur and 1 or 2 guys joined in from Pune as well. But which is the main office which is engaged in providing the service? The Nagpur office. So location will be considered as Nagpur. Directly concerned. And in the absence of such a place means if the service provider doesn't have any such place, he doesn't have any registered place nor any fixed place, then the residence. There are many people who just give service on the phone itself or on the computer, on the laptop, just by that. They don't have any office. They don't need any office. They don't need any office. Like online tutors who doesn't have any fixed place of business. They can just come online and tutor the students online. There are many such teachers who don't have any fixed establishment. So for them, the place of residence will be considered as the location. Okay. So 2 definitions exactly reverse of each other. Then next is manufacture. Simple definition. Manufacture means processing of raw material or inputs in any manner that results in emergence of underline new product. Having distinct name means a separate identity. Distinct name means a new identity. character and use. New, identity, character and use. By name it doesn't mean the name, like you are called as Amol and I am called as Farooq. Not like that. The identity should change. Like there was a plastic and this is called as pen. So when I molded the plastic in such a manner that it gets the shape, then I do not call it as a plastic, I call it as pen. So that's how. So new name means the identity. Name means identity. Okay. Character and use. And the term manufacturer shall be construed accordingly, means one who does this will be called as a manufacturer. He need not be the owner, right? He need not be the owner. Manufacturer need not be owner. Even if you manufacture goods on someone's behalf, you are still called as a manufacturer. So manufacturer means a person who does this process of bringing a new commodity into existence. Okay. Then next is market value. Market value means full amount which a recipient of supply is required to pay in order to obtain the goods or service or both of like kind and quality at or about the same time and at the same commercial level. Underline all these points. Where the recipient and the supplier are not related. Recipient and supplier are not related. So what is market value? Market value normally means the market price. We go and buy a product in the market, so there is an MRP written on that, maximum retail price written on it. So that is normally called as market value. Market value means one which is independent of the people. There is no relationship between the supplier and the recipient. It's a fair price, a negotiated price. So that is called as market value, right? So see the definition again. It has to be the full amount. Means if I am paying you 10 rupees before and then again 20 rupees and again 20 rupees thereafter. So we'll have to take aggregate. Okay, full amount. Full amount, complete amount which a recipient of supply is required to pay in order to obtain the goods or services. Like you paid 12,000 rupees to me for this DVD, or 14,000, or whatever the price may be. Different products are there online and pen drive and this version and that version, but each version has its own price. So you pay me the amount and you take the goods or you take the service. Of a like kind and quality. Now this is written to generalize the thing. Like if I talk about this pen, now I may sell this pen to you at 1 rupee, but generally the pen of this nature are sold at 5 rupees. So market value will be 5 rupees. So of a like kind and quality is referring to that industry, is referring to that kind of goods or that kind of service which is normally given at a normal price. So that means the market value. So therefore they have written of a like kind or quality at or about the same time. Like I am giving this pen to you today and we want to know what is the market value. So we cannot take another transaction which had taken place 6 months before. The other transaction which you are taking to determine the market value should have happened at or about the same time. At or about the same time. Means today if I am selling this pen and I want to know what is the market value, then I have to take the other transactions happening on this day. And if no transaction is happening this day, then maybe a day before, maybe 2 days before, but not 6 months before. So at or about the same time. At the same commercial level. At the same commercial level. So at the same commercial level means if I am selling this pen as a manufacturer to you as a dealer, that's a commercial level. I am a manufacturer, you are a dealer. Now to get the market value, I cannot take other transaction which is happening in retail trade. A retailer, a shopkeeper selling to consumer, that price cannot be taken here. So when I am selling this pen to you at this commercial level, the comparable sale should be taken on the same commercial level, not another commercial level. So commercial labels are different, like manufacturer to dealer, then dealer to wholesaler, then wholesaler to retailer, retailer to consumer. All these are at different commercial levels. Then B2B, B2C, business to business transaction, or I'm supplying in bulk and the other one is supplying in small quantities. So they cannot be compared because price fluctuations will happen, right? Okay, now let me explain you why we are seeing this definition. You can write down there that this definition, market value, will be used in the chapter of valuation. It will be used in the chapter of valuation. Now what happens in valuation is that sometimes if this person 1 is supplying some goods to person 2 at an actual value of say 32 rupees, but due to some reason we will reject this value. Now why? This I'll explain you then. In the chapter of valuation there are various conditions attached, that if all these conditions are satisfied, then only this value will be accepted and GST will be imposed on it. And if the conditions are not satisfied, we will reject this value. So if your actual value is rejected, then we have to find out what is the market value, the open market value. So then your value is replaced by the open market value. So when we are replacing your actual transaction value with open market value, then this definition comes into picture. Then what is the market value? So hence these conditions. So market value will be where another person, say Z1, is selling the goods to another person, that is Z2. They are not related to each other. The whole price is to be taken, which is at the same level. So we have to see at what level these people are, P1 and P2. And these two people should be at the same level. Like he's a manufacturer selling to a dealer, they should also be a manufacturer selling to dealer. So this person's and this person's commercial level should be same, at the same commercial level. Okay, they should be at the same commercial level, not at different commercial levels. And similarly these two people. So this whole transaction is happening from manufacturer to dealer, so this should also happen by manufacturer to dealer. So these two people are again should be at the same commercial level. Okay, and the goods should be of the same quality, like, kind and quality. So the goods that has been sold here and the goods that are being sold here should be comparable goods or comparable service and not something drastically different. So the goods here or the service should be the goods or service of the like kind and quality. So then this transaction will become a comparable transaction, and if this transaction becomes comparable transaction, then this price will become open market value. So this price will then be taken here for valuation purposes. Understood? Great. Then coming back, next definition is of mixed supply. This is again very interesting definition, and you can mark it as important also and write down section 8. We'll be using this definition in section 8. Now what we'll do in section 8 I'll not tell you right now, that we'll see in section 8, but we'll see the definition right here. Mixed supply means two or more individual supplies, two or more individual, it can be two or more, means 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 supplies of goods or services, or a combination thereof, means there can be goods and service together. So there can be supply of different goods together, there can be supply of goods and service together, or 4 or 5 services together. So basically mixed means a combination. It's a combination of goods, combination of services, or combination of goods and service put together for a consolidated price. we have not mentioned the price of different things separately. So don't confuse it with one point. One student once asked me, sir, we go to a mall and buy so many things. We put all the things in our that bag, the shopping bag. We take it to the counter, and the counter guy just bills. He just scans the barcode and bills it together. And then a long bill is getting printed. Suppose you have bought 10 t-shirts and 5 jeans and 10 this and that, and so everything will be billed together. Then you'll get that long bill, item wise, right? For a price of say 5,327, total amount came to 5,327. Similarly, you go to a kirana shop and buy so many things. It will be billed together in one bill. Item A, item B, item C, item D, and then the total. Will that be called as mixed supply? The answer is no. That is not mixed supply. If you put several items in a same invoice, that doesn't make it a mixed supply, right? Because we are mentioning the values of each item separately. Even if all those things are billed together, in the bill you will find the value separately. Each item, item A 2,000 rupees, item B 600 rupees, item C 400 rupees, item D so and so on and so forth. So when the amounts are mentioned separately for each item in the invoice, then it is independent sale. It is independent sale. And you can find out the rate of tax applicable to each such item, each such goods, each such service, and apply. So you can calculate GST separately for each item. Mixed supply, the concept of mixed supply comes into picture only when lot of things are put together at a consolidated price. So the example of it is items in set. Items in set. You go and buy a makeup box. That makeup box consists of several items. It may consist of lipstick and eyeliner and eyelashes and rouge and mascara and pencils and nail polish and this polish and that polish and so on and so forth. Lots of things are put into a single box, and that box is valued at 11,600 rupees. So that is a combination. Okay. Now these combination goods means whenever two or more goods are put together and sold, or two or more services, or two or more goods and service, it is a combination. This combination is divided into two things: composite and mixed. Composite and mixed. Composite supply is a thing where all these things complement each other, and it is being sold in the routine course of business. It happens in the routine course of business. They are put together, they are bundled together in the ordinary course of business. So we call it as naturally bundled. Several things are naturally bundled. Like you go to a restaurant and order say idli sambar. So idli and sambar will be put together and given it to you. Now, is it naturally bundled? Yes, that's how it happens. That's how it is sold. That's how it is put. It's naturally bundled product. Okay, so that is what we call as naturally bundled. So when two things are naturally bundled together, then take another example. You can take so many examples. Tomorrow you'll go out in the market, you'll see so many things. And it should happen. You should see things. Whenever you are visiting places, you should see you should be observant of what is happening around you. And just, it should click. Oh, this is composite, this is mixed, this is composite, this is mixed. You go to a hotel tomorrow, and we have got hotel room with breakfast. So there's breakfast also, and there's a hotel room also. Two things clubbed together. You go to a party hall, and they'll give you a place on rent plus the food. So they'll charge together 2,000 rupees per plate. So you can get married also, means the whole function is taking place. So there is a hall which you are using. So hall, the use of hall is renting of premises plus the food. Both of them clubbed together and charged together. So two things are there. But these are naturally bundled products, because that is how the industry works. The industry sells these two things together, either goods or services, or a combination of goods and service. Now combination of goods and service can be, I'm selling you goods and I'm also installing it at your place. Installation is also to be done. So installation is a service, goods are being sold. So first you sell the goods and then you install it. So naturally bundled, because that's how it happens. You sell an AC and then you go and install it. It's naturally bundled. So if the two things are naturally bundled and one of them is predominant and the other one is a subsidiary, then it is called as composite goods. Naturally bundled will be called as composite goods. Okay, composite goods. And if these two or more things are not naturally bundled, they are two very different things, but put together and sold for a consolidated price. For example, I may sell a TV like this, and along with that I've given a scheme. It's a sales scheme. So what I've done, I am selling TV, and then I'm saying that you will get a mobile free on that. So Sony Television says that we'll supply a Sony TV, a big, if you buy a 65-inch Sony TV, you will get one Sony mobile free of cost. So ultimately I'm supplying two things. Now that I may call it as free of cost, nothing is free. Its price is already inclusive. Okay, so we have joined the two things. Now just tell me, a TV and a mobile phone, are they naturally bundled? Is that how people sell TV? Are they to be used together? Or in any way, are they naturally bundled? No, it's just a scheme that we are launching. That if you buy a TV, you get mobile free of cost. So these two will be called as mixed supply. As they are not naturally bundled, they will be called as mixed supply. Okay, so that's how you define combination goods. Combination goods or combination service will be classified into two, either composite or mixed. Now let's see the definition. Now you can understand. So mixed supply means two or more individual supplies or goods of goods or service, or a combination thereof, made in conjunction with each other by a taxable person for a single price. This is important, for a single price, where such supply does not constitute a composite supply. So if they are not composite, then they are mixed. So you have to study the definition of composite supply. So what composite supply says? That these two are naturally bundled. So if these two are naturally bundled, it is a composite supply. And if they are not naturally bundled, then it becomes a mixed supply. Understood? Like an example is given there. Supply of package consisting of canned foods, sweets, chocolates, cake, dry fruit, aerated drinks, and fruit juices. Wow. So there can be a big box containing all these things. So are they naturally bundled? Is that how each item is sold? Fruit juice is sold along with dry fruits? No, they can be sold independently also, but this is a gift box. Normally people make these gift boxes on Diwali, New Year, and so on and so forth. So they make those big gift boxes, including the dry fruit boxes you must have seen, containing badam and kajus and pistachios and anjeer and so on and so forth, almonds. And so they put it together. They put it together, but they are not naturally bundled. You cannot eat. Can you eat something separately? Yes, it can be sold separately. It is sold separately, but here we are making a good, beautiful gift box. Hence, we are putting them together. So it will be called as mixed supply. Where supplied for a single price is a mixed supply. Each of these items can be supplied separately, and it is not dependent on each other. It shall not be mixed supply if these items are supplied separately. If they are supplied separately for a separate value, then they are not mixed supply, they are independent supplies. Then next definitions of money. Money means Indian legal tender. No need to study the definition of money. Money is very simple. Everyone knows what is money. But here it is only written that money includes currency notes as well as all other forms of payment. All the forms of payment will be called as money. So it can be letter of credit, draft, pay orders, traveler check, promissory note, bills of exchange, checks, and every other thing. Any instrument by which you can pay, including ECS. So that will be called as money. But shall not include any currency that is held for its numismatic value. Numismatic value means the old coins which are out of use. They are not currency anymore. They are not out of. They are not used to pay that 1 rupee. Some old currency like Greek currency or Roman currency or even our old time currency, Mohenjo-daro and Harappa and Akbar and Shah Jahan and that time of currency. If you have those coins, gold coins and all. So they are not used currently. Even though 1 rupee is printed there, but that is not valued at 1 rupee. It may have lakhs of rupees of value. So they will not be called as money. Okay. And there is no need to read the explanation also, but if you want you can read sometime. The non-resident taxable person, very simple, means any person who occasionally undertakes transactions involving supply of goods or service or both, whether as a principal or agent or in any other capacity, but who has no fixed place of business or residence in India. Means basically NRs, non-residents, somebody staying in US, but he makes casual supply in India. For example, an actor, Hollywood actor, he stays there, he has his office there, but he may come down to India for some film shooting. So he gives a 1 service or maybe 2 service or maybe acting in a advertisement or something, and then he goes back. So when he comes to India for this one job, he will be called as non-resident taxable person, because he doesn't have a residence in India, nor does he have a fixed establishment in India. Occasionally, who occasionally means sometime only, not on a regular basis. So all foreigners will come here in this definition, who do not have a permanent establishment in India, they don't have any fixed place in India, they just come sometime, sell some goods, give some service and go back. Then next is non-taxable supply, means supply of goods or service or both which is not leviable to tax. Now we'll see this in section 7 basically, and 8 and 9, section 7 and section 9. That what is not leviable. Section 9 is the levy section. So when we'll go to the levy section, we'll see section 7 is definition of supply. So in supply also there are some things excluded, certain transactions which are not called a supply. So if they are not called a supply, means there is no levy on them. And section 9 also lists certain goods which are not covered by the GST law, basically alcoholic liquor. So you can remember here, and you'll always remember this example. It is so nice example, alcoholic liquor. So alcoholic liquor is non-taxable supply because there is no levy of GST. Then non-taxable territory. Now it is given here also, so you can cut this line. Non-taxable territory means territory which is outside the taxable territory. Simple. So we have seen the definition of India. So anything which is outside that is non-taxable territory. The notification, no use, other territory, no use, output tax means the tax chargeable under this act on the taxable supply. Whatever we supply and the tax which is imposed on that is called as output tax. So there will be input tax and there will be output tax. Input tax means the tax on our purchases. Output tax means the tax on our supplies. So that is called as output tax. And obviously output tax is on outward supply. So what we supply is called as outward supply. What we purchase and it comes to us, that is inward supply. And what we give is an outward supply. Simple examples. Then definition of person is there. Like in income tax there were 7 persons, here also there is a long list. Here there is a long list, much more than 7, but most of them are common, like individual, HUF, company, firm. Then LLP. In income tax LLP is covered by firm itself, here it is given separately, limited liability partnership. Then AOP BOIs, whether incorporated in India or outside India or not. Then any corporation established by or under the Central Act, that is statutory corporations, or a government company. Statutory corporations and government companies, they are also considered here. Then body corporates incorporated under laws of country outside India. Any company which is incorporated under the foreign laws, basically the foreign companies you can say. Then cooperative society. Then local authorities. Then central government and state government itself, they are also covered by definition of person, because they may also supply goods, they are also liable to pay GST. Then society, there is the charitable societies which are registered under Societies Registration Act. Trusts, and every artificial juridical person not falling under any of the above. So basically you have to read twice, nothing more than that. The next is section 285, place of business. What is included in place of business? What all things can you consider as place of business? A chai thela, a pani puri stall, what all things can be called as place of business? Let's see. First, a place of a place from where the business is ordinarily carried on. Ordinarily carried on. Now this place can be anything. It can be as small as a tea stall or as big as a factory. Okay, ordinarily carried on. So you use the tea stall every day. So that becomes your place of business. And includes a warehouse, a godown, means where the stock is kept, even though you don't sell goods from there, but you keep your stock, so that is also called as place of business. Or any other place where a taxable person stores his goods, supplies or receives goods or services, or both. So from wherever you supply, wherever you receive, means your receipt department, your stores, your supply department, all these will be called as business place. Or a place where a taxable person maintains his books of accounts. If you keep your books of accounts somewhere else, that is at your registered office, which is in a skyscraper building, then that place will also be called as place of business. So your factory is also place of business, and your office where you maintain your books is also place of business. And a place where a taxable person is engaged in business through an agent. Through an agent means a place where your agent works will also be called as your place of business. And then of course it is given that the definition is inclusive in nature. Like I have already explained many times, that whenever any definition start with the words includes, then it is an inclusive definition. So in every inclusive definition, the ABC clauses, the list is illustrative and not exhaustive. So you can have much more places as place of business. So these three are just examples, they are illustrations. So that is given here. The inclusive nature of the definition indicates that the places or location listed in the definition are illustrative and not exhaustive. So it is not a complete list, it is open list. From the three clauses of such illustrative locations, it can be seen that each clause makes a reference to taxable person. Therefore, place of business should be understood as a term that is specific to each taxable person, having distinct registrations. Again the same thing, distinct registrations. So say in the case of a company having operations across 10 cities in 2 states, this set of cities being the places of business for one state would be mutually exclusive from that of the other. Means this is one person, Maharashtra registration will be one person, so all the places of business here will be places of business of this person. And then in Rajasthan, if I have got more places of business with a separate registration, then these will be exclusive and these will be exclusive. So you cannot say that I have got 10 places of business. My Maharashtra registration number is one person and this is one person. So this person has 5 places of business and this person has 5 places of business. So below are the implications in relation to place of business. Registration of such places as additional places of business. In one state, if you have got more than one place of business, in one state only, more than one place, but business is same, then you have to register one. So one will be registered as a registered place. The others will be mentioned in the registration certificate as additional places of business. Like in my case, my Nagpur office is a registered office and my Pune office is mentioned as additional place of business. So that is given there in the first point. It says, although there is no explicit requirement under law to declare all places of business as additional places of business, this would facilitate transportation of goods between places of business or from job workers' premise to any of the places of business, which can be supported with delivery challan, the details of which would form part of the way bill, the e-way bill that's going to come. Already come, you can say. So therefore it's important to register them as additional place of business, because tomorrow if I want to send some goods from Nagpur office to Pune office, if Pune office is not registered, is not shown as a additional place of business, then it will become difficult to send. But if it is shown in my registration certificate, then it can, the goods can be easily sent, and e-way bill can also be made accordingly. Then maintenance of separate accounts in relation to each place of business, such as details of production or manufacture, inward and outward supply, stock, input tax credit, output tax payable and paid. You have to make separate accounts for each place of business. And departmental audit can also be carried out in respect of registered persons at any of the places of business. The audit party can go anywhere to all my places of business. So likewise, it's simple. Then place of supply means the place of supply is referred to in chapter 5 of Integrated Goods and Services Tax Act, which can be interstate and intrastate. This we have discussed in brief sometimes. Inter means one state to another, intra means within the state. So these definitions we'll see in the chapter of IGST. Then prescribed has no meaning. Principal means the principal. Agent's principal is called as principal, who supplies goods through his agent, so he is called as a principal. And principal place of business means the principal place of business as given in certificate of registration. Like in my case, Nagpur office is the principal place and Pune office is additional place. Then principal supply. Principal supply definition is related to that composite supply definition. Composite supply, where two or more things are put together and supplied together, in which one is principal and the other is subsidiary. So in that context this definition is given. What is principal? Out of composite, one which is the main is called as principal. The main supply will be called as principal. Predominant element it is called as. Predominant means the dominant element. Then proper officer has no meaning. We'll see that definition. Who are proper officers? Then recipient. Recipient is again another important definition. Mark it is important. Who is recipient? First, where a consideration is payable for the supply of goods or service or both, the person who is liable to pay. Liable to pay. Whoever is liable to pay is the recipient. Like in our case, you have to pay for the DVDs and the USBs. So who is liable to pay? If you have booked, you are liable to pay. So you are the recipient. Second, where no consideration is payable, means I am supplying some goods free of cost. Then who is the recipient? The person to whom the goods are delivered or made available, or to whom possession or use of the goods is given or made available. So if I am supplying some DVDs free of cost, for example, then who is the recipient in this case? If I deliver it to you, then you are the recipient, the person to whom they are delivered or made available for use, okay, or to whom the possession is given for use. He is the recipient. And where no consideration is payable for supply of a service, in case of service, what will happen? So B clause is for goods, underline goods, and C clause is for service. Okay. So where no consideration is payable for supply of service, the person to whom this service is rendered, like I am setting up a new hair cutting salon, hair spa, and I call people that okay, today from 12 o'clock in the afternoon till 12 o'clock midnight we'll be giving free service. Whoever wants to get their haircut or face massage or this or that can come to our shop. We'll provide it free of cost. So who is the recipient here? We are not charging anything. Who is the recipient? One who comes. One who comes and sits on my chair and gets his haircut done. He is the recipient. Or gets a face massage done. He is the recipient. Or she, as the case may be. Right? And any reference to a person. Now the definition continues. So these are the first 3 points. If it is for consideration, then one who is liable to pay. If it is not for consideration, then to whom the goods are delivered or made available, or in case of service, the person to whom it is rendered, the person who is the beneficiary of that service. And any reference to a person to whom supply is made shall be construed as the reference to the recipient of the supply and shall include an agent acting on behalf. Agent can also sometimes receive the service on behalf of his principal. So on behalf of recipient in relation to goods or service or both supplied. Simple. Means whenever this phrase will come, person to whom supply is made, then it will be construed, means understood with reference to recipient. So this is the definition of recipient. Now if I ask that to whom the service is rendered, recipient. Then registered person means a person who is registered under section 25 but does not include having a unique identification number. Now this concept we'll see when we'll go there. Right now you can just write down foreign diplomatic missions. A person like foreign diplomatic missions in India, they are not liable to pay tax, but they are still registered. So they are given a unique identity number for just the purpose of accounting of their transactions, nothing else. So these people to whom UIN is given, they are not to be considered as registered persons, though they are registered, but they are not considered as registered persons, remember. Then regulations means regulations made by the board, so no need to study. Then removal of goods. So removal, this definition will come into play in the chapter of time of supply as well as invoice, when a person is required to make invoice. So in that this definition will come. Removal and delivery, these two definitions, removal and delivery. So let's see what is removal. Means dispatch of goods for delivery by the supplier thereof or by any other person acting on behalf of supplier. So actual delivery is not removal. Removal means dispatch. So how will you understand this? Very simple. Now let's say this is my factory in Mumbai. Okay, so this is the factory and the buyer of the goods lives in Noida. So the truck comes in and I dispatch the goods in that truck. So the truck containing the goods will move out from my factory. So as soon as it moves out, this is called as removal, because this is dispatch. So as soon as the goods are dispatched, they will be considered as removed for delivery. So for delivery means delivery is going to take place later on. Now this truck will come here and then the goods will be delivered to the buyer. So delivery will take place later on. But as soon as the goods are dispatched for delivery, means for the purpose of delivery, this dispatch will be considered as removal. Okay. So this is important. So suppose dispatch is on 13th of October and actual delivery takes place on 22nd of October. What is the date of removal? 13th October. This is removal. Dispatch is equal to removal. Okay. So this comes into play, as I told you, in invoicing also, that the person has to make invoice on or before 13th of October. You have to make invoice on or before 13th of October, that is on or before the date of removal. Okay. So dispatch, first word, and second, collection of the goods by the recipient thereof or by any other person acting on behalf of such recipient. Collection of goods. So collection of goods word applies in RCM. This is in RCM, reverse charge mechanism. So in reverse charge mechanism, what will be the date of removal? Because reverse charge mechanism applies to the recipient. Recipient doesn't actually remove, he actually receives. But for him, receipt of goods, collection of goods means receipt, will be called as removal. So he has to make invoice. The recipient has to make invoice of the goods received, as if he is the seller, as if he is the seller under RCM, reverse charge mechanism. So this also we'll study in invoice chapter, and then depending on invoice comes your time of supply. So dispatch word is for forward charge. This is forward charge mechanism, FC, and collection is for reverse charge. Then return. Return doesn't mean return of goods. Return means the documents that we are going to file, GSTR 1, GSTR 2, GSTR 3B, and so on and so forth. So we have to study the whole chapter on this, returns. Then reverse charge, of course everyone knows reverse charge. I just told you, is where the person who is recipient is made liable to pay tax. And this happens in section 9, subsection 3 and subsection 4, which we are going to discuss in due course of time, or under subsection 3, 4 and 5 of IGST Act. Then revisional authority has no meaning, we'll see when it comes. Schedule means schedule appended to this act. Securities means share securities. Then comes section 2, clause 102, that is services. Now what is included in services? How they have defined the word service? In a negative way. Means anything which is not goods is service. Anything other than goods. So anything which is not goods, we have seen the definition of goods. So anything which is not goods is automatically a service. Means it is still covered by GST laws and chargeable to tax. But two more exclusions are there. Means money and securities. Now these two things, money and securities, are neither goods nor service. Means these two things, money and securities, are neither goods nor service, means no GST is chargeable on them. So if I give you money, if I take money from you, if I give you securities either by sale or gift or anything, or take it, there will be no GST. Okay. So money and securities by themselves are not goods nor service, means no GST. But the definition further states, but includes, means service includes activities relating to the use of money use of money, activities relating to use of money like banking. Banking is a service because they charge consideration from you, like they give you a demand draft and they charge commission for that. So that commission on demand draft is chargeable to tax. Okay, or its conversion. Second point is conversion. So one is use, second is conversion by cash or by any other mode, means online, from one form, currency or denomination to another form, currency or denomination, for which a separate consideration is charged. So this is a simple thing, like dollars converted into rupees, or dollars converted into euros, or euros into rupees, or rupees into euros, all the foreign currency transactions, the conversion transactions. Or it can be one denomination to another, like if I give you change, you bring me a 2000 rupees note and you ask me for coins, so I'll say okay, I'll give you coins, but I'll charge 20 rupees for that. I'll convert the denomination, but I'll charge 20 rupees, means separate consideration is charged. So if the denomination is changed and a separate consideration is charged for that by the name of commission or fees or whatever name you give, then that will be called as service. So that 20 rupees that I'm charging will be subject to GST. And explanation is also there, which says that for removal of doubts, it is hereby clarified that the expression services includes facilitating or arranging transactions in securities. So like we have seen for money, that anything which is in relation to money, transactions which are in relating to money, use or conversion, is a service. Similarly for securities also, the broker who facilitates the transactions in securities and he charges brokerage for that, so that brokerage will be subject to GST. It will be liable to GST. So services by brokers, services by intermediaries in security industry will be liable for GST. But security by itself, like I sell today a few percentage of my holding in Reliance, as you all know, I hold around 46% in Reliance. I sell 0.05% today for some million of rupees. That will not be subject to GST. But the brokerage that I pay to the broker for facilitating this trade, that brokerage will be liable for GST. Okay, so simple definition. Then state includes union territory with legislature. State includes union territory with legislature. This we saw in first chapter. Then state tax means the state goods and service tax. Supplier in relation to any goods or service or both shall mean the person supplying. Recipient was the person receiving. Supplier means the person who supplies, and shall include his agent acting on his behalf. Then tax period, taxable person means the person who is required to be registered under 22 or 24. 24 is compulsory registration. 22 is the persons who are liable to register. This we'll see in detail later on. Taxable supply, taxable territory of no use, telecommunication service no use. Turnover in a state or turnover in union territory means the total turnover. Now this is an important definition. Mark it as important, because this definition comes into play at various places, like composition scheme, then valuation itself, the chapter of valuation, chapter of ITC. In all the major chapters we'll use this definition, turnover. So it's a very important definition. So let's see. It says it means aggregate value. Aggregate means total, composite value of all taxable supplies, excluding the value of inward supplies on which the person is liable to pay on reverse charge mechanism. So if I am liable to pay tax on reverse charge, that value of goods which I have purchased, but I am liable to pay tax, it's fine, but that is purchases. Will it be calculated as my turnover? Will it be aggregated into my turnover? No. Purchases are not to be taken as turnover. Turnover is on supply side, not on purchase side. So even though I am liable to pay tax under reverse charge, it will not be counted as my turnover, right? Then exempt goods. Exempt goods are included in turnover. This is an interesting point. So turnover includes taxable supplies as well as exempt supplies. Turnover is taxable plus exempt, both. Okay, exempt supplies made within a state or union territory by a taxable person. Then exports, so plus exports. Export of goods or services or both. Now exports are exempt, but they are included in turnover. So when I say total turnover, you will include all of them. Taxable plus exempt plus exports. And interstate supplies of goods or service or both, made from the state or union territory by the said taxable person. Interstate is also included. Okay. But excludes central tax, state tax, union territory tax and integrated tax. Means you have to exclude the taxes, but you have to include all these: taxable plus exempt plus exports plus interstate sale. All of them are included. And what is excluded? Less. What is to be reduced? The GST. The GST itself is to be excluded from turnover. Means turnover will be of value net of tax, not gross of tax. Okay. So if tax is included, you have to deduct it. Like for example, I sell goods at 10,000 and there is 1800 GST on that. So I am recovering from you 11,800, right? 10,000 plus 1800 tax. So I am recovering 11,800. What will be turnover? Turnover will not be 11,800. Turnover will be only 10,000. Okay. So first you understand that turnover includes exempt also. Taxable plus exempt plus exports plus interstate. But it does not include the GST. GST can be ST, CT, UT or IT. All four are to be excluded. And that is given there also. The expression turnover in state or UT is a replica of the expression aggregate turnover. But for the fact that turnover in state is restricted to the turnover of a taxable person as opposed to aggregate turnover with its PAN based, the following references are made to the phrase in design. So leave it aside because state taxes anyway is not in your course. But they've just given that it is replica. The definition under state is replica of the central. Then another definition, usual place of residence. What is your residence? So it says in case of individual, you are individual, the place where he ordinarily resides. Place of residence means where you are ordinarily residing, because you may have different homes. You may have a home here and there and there and there and so many places. But the place where you normally reside means for majority of the days reside, that will be your usual place of residence. And in other cases means for companies and firms, that is non-individuals, the place where it is incorporated, or otherwise legally constituted. Where is it constituted? So normally, even if we make a partnership firm, we make an agreement between partners, and below that we sign, all the partners sign, and we write the date and place where we are signing. So the place where the constitution takes place, where the firm is constituted, that will become the usual place of residence. Then union territories are defined, this we have seen in the first chapter. Then union territory tax is defined, means the UT GST, no use. Valid return means the return which has been filed under section 39, there is GSTR. 3b. Then voucher. Voucher. Now this definition comes voucher. This we'll use later on in the chapter of invoice. Okay. Say you can read it once. Means an instrument where there is an obligation to accept it as consideration or part consideration for supply of goods. As consideration or part consideration for supply of goods or service or both, and where the goods or services or both to be supplied or the identities of their potential suppliers are either indicated on the instrument itself or in related documentation, including the terms and conditions for use of such instrument. What did you understand? Nothing. Okay, let me explain in brief. You just write down about that. Valuation, then time of supply also, and the chapter of invoicing. In all the chapters we'll use this word voucher. Now what it is very simple thing, let me tell you. You as a student score 95 marks in IDT. Now as I have announced that I'll give you certain gifts if you score merit ranks. So if you score 95 in IDT and your all India rank, like last time we scored 1 and 2, both were my students, Mohit Gupta and Prashant, AIR 1, 2, and in all we scored, means our students. So when our students score, I say I score 19 merit ranks, 19 merit ranks we got. And this continues. So obviously tomorrow you will score an all India rank, right? Say first, nothing less than first should be good enough. So you score first all India rank and scoring 95 marks in IDT. So I decide to gift you, Farooq Haq Classes decides to gift anything, some goods worth some amount. Now okay, let's take 51,000 rupees. Why not? It can be more. This is just I'm giving an example. Or it can be less. No. If you score all India rank 1, it will be much more. It will be more than 51,000 or at least 51,000. Okay. So we decide to gift you something. Now I have got options. Either I'll make you a cash gift and then you go and purchase whatever you want, or I'll gift you something in kind. So maybe I'll purchase a laptop of 51,000 and gift it to you. Maybe some watch of 51,000, maybe some iPad or something, iPhone 51,000 and gift it to you. Or I can gift you a voucher. Right? I can gift you a voucher. So what I'll do is, I go to, Farooq goes to which store? Any electronic store. Reliance Digital. I give them rupees 51,000 in cash or by check, whether. So let's write down check. I give them, not gift. I give them. I don't need to give Reliance. So I give them a 51,000 check and take a voucher. So what they give me is a voucher, also known as a gift voucher. There is a spelling error, so let me correct. Voucher worth 51,000. Then I hand over this voucher to the student in a ceremony, felicitation ceremony. We gift that voucher to the student, telling him to go to Reliance Digital and buy whatever he wants to buy. So now see, two things can happen. Basically this voucher entitles you to take supply, to accept supply of goods or services or both It can be, like in this example, it is for goods. Another example, it can be for service, or it can be for both goods and service. But now see the characteristics of this voucher. When I'm taking the voucher, at that time I may ask for a specific item. I may ask for a voucher for Apple iPhone 8, such and such model. So they'll give me exactly that voucher. So on the voucher it will be mentioned that this voucher is for Apple iPhone 8, 128 GB. Okay, so that becomes a specific voucher. So specific voucher is a voucher where the goods are identified in the voucher itself. Goods are identified in the voucher itself. Or it can be general. General means you can go to Reliance Digital. So Reliance Digital will not mention any item on that. They will say, okay, you can buy any product from us and we'll adjust 51,000 with that. So that is an open voucher where goods are not identified. Goods or in fact service not identified at the time when the voucher is issued. Okay. So one is called a specific, or another is called as general. Secondly, it can also be like the supplier is identified, and sometimes the supplier also may not be identified. Like a voucher is given by Amazon. Amazon is just an electronic commerce operator. The actual suppliers are other persons. So Amazon gives me a voucher and says that okay, you can buy on our site anything worth so and so at a future point of time. But whom you are buying with is not known. You can buy from XYZ Limited, you can buy from this, you can buy from there, you can buy from anywhere. So it can happen. Or there are voucher companies like Sodexo. Sodexo gives you the voucher and then you can use that voucher in any kind of store. You can go to this store, you can go to that store, you can go to this store. So even the suppliers are not mentioned sometimes. And if voucher is given by Reliance Digital, then of course Reliance Digital is actually mentioned there. So you can encash this voucher only in Reliance Digital. So sometimes the supplier is identified, sometimes it may not be identified. Sometimes the goods are identified, sometimes the goods or service may not be identified. So these are different characteristics of the voucher. Now you remember these points because when we'll go to time of supply chapter, then we'll see that what is the time of supply means when the GST should be charged on this voucher. At the time when the voucher is issued to me, or when the student goes and encashes that voucher and buys the goods. So what should be the time of supply? When the company gives me the voucher, or when the student goes and encashes that voucher against the goods. So I'll tell you right now that for specific goods, if the goods are already mentioned in the voucher, then time when the voucher is issued itself is the time of supply. So GST becomes payable right at this point of time when the voucher is issued. Okay. And so 51,000 will become taxable when the voucher is issued. And if it is a general voucher, means we don't know the goods, then the time of supply comes when the student goes and encashes that voucher. Means he buys goods and settles the amount by paying the voucher. So at that time the tax element will arise. The differentiation is because of the rate of tax. Because here in specific case the goods are known. If the goods are known, the rate is known. If the rate is known, you apply it and charge tax. So rate of tax applicable to voucher is the rate applicable to the goods against which the voucher is exchanged. So if you know Apple iPhone, we know the rate of Apple iPhone, charge tax. If it is a general, then we don't know which goods are going to be purchased. Whether the customer, the student is going to purchase a phone or an iPad or a washing machine or a TV or a fridge or what, we don't know. Or an AC, we don't know. So unless the student comes and encashes, we don't know what rate to apply. So therefore we'll wait. We'll wait till he comes and encashes the voucher. So then tax becomes payable when the voucher is exchanged against the goods. Understood? Very good. So that is definition of voucher. See again. Means an instrument, so it's an instrument, a voucher, where there is an obligation to accept it as consideration. So it is accepted as payment, right? So later on when you will go to encash, you will hand over this voucher. So voucher is taken as payment. So it is taken as consideration or part consideration for supply of goods or service or both, and where the goods or service or both to be supplied or the identities of their potential suppliers are either indicated on the instrument itself or in related documentation, including the terms and conditions of use of such instrument. Simple. So sometimes the supplier's name can be indicated, may or may not be indicated. So it may be or it may not be. Similarly, the goods may be indicated or may not be. So where goods or services or both to be supplied or the identities of their potential suppliers are either indicated on the instrument itself or in the terms and conditions. The next definition is of work contract. Work contract is again an important one. And what do you mean by work contract? Work contract is a combination of goods and service. Goods and service, like building contracts. I give you the contract to construct a building for me. So you have to bring the material and you have to build the building also. So you have to bring the material, all the cement, steel and whatever things are required, sand, etc., bricks, and then you will apply the labor also, you will bring the labor also who will construct the building and give it to me. So you are giving me two things, the building material plus the labor, your service. So work contract is combination of two, the goods and the service. So that is defined there. See, work contract means a contract for building, construction, fabrication. Now these are all the examples: completion, erection, installation, fitting out, improvement, modification, repair, maintenance. After sales, maintenance contracts are entered, like in case of computers. AMCs are there. AMCs are inclusive of labor and material. We have got lift in our building and there is an AMC. So that AMC includes the items, the spare parts as well as the labor. So if something goes wrong tomorrow, I don't have to pay them separately. They will bring the spare part and apply. They will install. It's their job. So most of AMC contracts, repair and maintenance contracts, are also with material and labor, both. Then renovation, alteration, commissioning of any immovable property wherein transfer of property in goods is involved in the execution of such contract. Transfer of property in goods, whether as goods or in some other form, is involved in the execution of contract. Means the cement that you will bring, obviously the cement will get transferred to me because I will become the owner of the building now. The sand that you have brought, the mortar that you have brought, the steel that you have brought will all get transferred to me in the course of the work contract, because ultimately I am going to be the owner of the building. And at the last it is given that any words and expressions used and not defined in this act, not defined in this act, but defined in IGST or the UT or the Compensation Act, shall have the same meaning as assigned to them in those acts. Means if some word is not defined in CGST Act, but is defined in IGST or UTGST Act or the State Compensation Cess Act, then the meaning which is given here will be taken as its meaning in CGST Act also. Simple. This is called as borrowed meaning. Okay, so these were the definitions on the CGST, and now let's see the IGST Act. A few definitions are there. Or I think this lecture has become quite long, so no problem, we'll see in the next